Hi people, me again obviously, Moreno Ravenberg. Yeah, I wrote an article. As always, this video will be embedded in said article. You can find the link to this video, the link to this article in the video description. So in the description of this video. Now, let me briefly go over it. Obviously, you can tell what time it is based on the header. The origin of grimoires and magical practices. In this article, I'll be discussing the above based on my own knowledge and experience. I'm stating in advance that some things I mention are my educated opinion and therefore not set in stone. Just be aware of that. But obviously, the merit of my word speaks for itself. Let's start off with the basic concept of the magic circle and triangle of the art, all too familiar to most people, even non-mages, as depicted below. And then you've got an image of a magic circle and the triangle of the art. You might wonder, where did all this come from based on intent, etc. What if I told you that this system is meant to constrict malevolent entities at its core? Because that's exactly what it is. Just think about it. Why would you need to go through to such measures for a spirit summoning if he, she, or it isn't the friendliest, to put it that way? But constricting someone like this will piss them off either way, of course. This applies to the material plane as well, obviously, for us as people. Why do you have to talk to a convict through a glass barrier or similar constraints rather than talk to them like a normal person? Well, because they're prone to hostility, that's why. That's the logic behind the above at a base and primordial level. Needless to say, you wouldn't or don't need any of this to interact to a non-hostile, normal spirit or entity. Your own strength and conviction protects you by default, and you're only calling upon as much energy as you can mentally. So it can be dismissed by your own wit at the same time. It can be dismissed by your own wit all the same, at least in general. Now, second topic, the origin of grimoires. I'll be giving, in relation to this topic, a few well-known grimoires as an example. Most of these, at least in the Western world, are attributed to the great King Solomon, but with all due respect to him, he isn't the only one or directly responsible for them in the format that we know them. They are more named after him as a means of paying homage, since he, at the very least, most likely was the founder and architect of magic, the way it is generally practiced in the Western tradition and globally, to a lesser extent at least. The Goetia and its 72 spirits, for example, based on my extensive observation, is like the baseball card collection, magically speaking. Spirits, entities, etc. were traded, acquired, collected, and whatnot, along with the exaggeration of their powers and skills, attributes, etc. For anything from bragging rights to making a sale, and it goes on. This is excluding the premise of misinformation being implemented in it as a means to prevent those deemed unworthy to achieve success or to throw them off. In this case, the aim was that those that deserve it and have proven themselves worthy will see the truth of things. As I already discussed in my evaluation of it, see below, the Goetia has mainly infernal spirits, fallen angels, etc. and pagan gods that were demonized, especially applicable to the outline of the Goetia. Pretty much all of them, regardless of nature, are in essence coerced to take on hideous forms, even if that's not what they're like in actuality. And it just kept getting updated until what we have in the present day. Now, second example, the Greater Key of Solomon, the Order of the Pentacles, is another example. To my understanding as a whole, these pentacles serve as astral magnets in alignment with entities that are associated with them towards one or more purposes, and was created a long time ago, at least more than a few centuries ago. Not a lot to be said about it other than what I've already stated. It does exactly as mentioned in the last edition that is used in present day. Potentially one or more pentacles were lost in translation and in the midst of the time-based overhaul from era to era, since it hasn't eluded me that not all the planets in it have the default 7 pentacles. Some might be missing. And yeah, that's essentially it. Yeah, what can I say, honestly? In terms of what I just said, the origin of magical practices, you know, you name it, like even the average person is aware of it. You see it in movies and stuff like that. If people want to do any kind of spirit summoning of a kind, the first thing they do, in any way, shape or form, they draw a magic circle. They like establish an area in which they're going to do their thing. They put candles, magic circle, blah 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 blah. That whole base premise of like a magic circle in the triangle of the arts, so an area in which you'll be summoning your spirit, that whole notion is essentially derived at the root or at a primordial level. It stems from summoning malevolent entities for the reasons I just explained, you know. I mean, it's like talking, this is an existential concept, I want to say, as in it applies to living creatures generally speaking as a whole, and that includes us. Well, specifically us as people. Why do you think that, for example, you are going to visit a cousin in the penitentiary, in a local penitentiary or a county jail, you name it, whatever, and your cousin is a notorious serial killer that was also convicted of cannibalism, you name it. You'll have to talk to him you'll have to talk to him or interact with him, all the while him being constrained like Hannibal Lecter and whatnot. And all of that is for a reason, because he is prone to committing his misdeeds, his nefarious deeds. And that's the difference between talking to the average person. You can talk to the average person on the street because, generally speaking, the average person is just that. They're normal. As in, the chance of them committing any kind of misdeeds of any kind towards you or their direct environment is within a civil society or just plain civil society, highly unlikely. Okay, rarely, unless the person is just whacked out of their mind, then yeah, it's not happening. The person will behave in a normal context, so in line or in keeping with society's rules and laws, whether it be ethically or otherwise. But someone like that, someone that is already a convicted felon or similar, is someone that has already showcased, and it's documented by society standards, that they are prone to doing something really bad. And that's why you have extra safeguards and precautionary measures in place. Because you can't just leave the person like the average person, because it's not the average person. It's someone that's going to, you know, if you give him or her a chance, there's a good likelihood that they'll do the same things that they are, if they're exposed to the same conditions that made it so that they committed these felonies, then there is a high probability that they will do so. As the saying goes, a leopard rarely changes its spots and a zebra rarely its stripes. So that's where this comes from, at the root, at a primordial level. Okay, this system as a whole with the magic circle is used to summon infernal spirits. Like the very first time that someone had the idea to do something like this, in a manner of speaking, it is to call upon and to constrain evil entities that will want to hurt you the second you summon them. The whole system at the root is simply to go about dealing with these spirits and to coerce them, these malevolent or malignant entities, to get them to do your bidding. It's like having slaves, essentially. I mean, it goes back to times in slavery. What happened during so many slave uprisings? Slaves killed their masters, exactly. It was only a matter of time before slaves were like, hey, if we take that guy's gun away, then, you know, it's like 20 of us versus only one of him, you know. So if we manage to like wrestle that gun away from him, it's game over. We can beat the ever-loving bejesus out of him. Like that. So yeah, and for people that were wondering, for example, then why doesn't such an evil entity attack you the second you're done with your ritual? Because they're bound by cosmic law. Okay, when you're just going about daily life, all the while them doing your bidding, they're not allowed, so to speak, to attack you just out of nowhere. They're allowed to interact with you at best, but they're not allowed to attack you in any way, shape, or form. But when you're summoning them and you're calling upon them within the confines of a magical practice, like at a base level with your circle and everything, then it's pretty much, you know, fair game. You're fair game because you're the one that called upon them. So any influence they exert over you falls within the scope of what they're allowed to do. That's simply what I wanted to explain for people. That it's interesting, especially for people that were wondering, hey, at a root level or at a base level or at root, where did this whole notion of a magic circle come from? Like, you know, did some guy just have the idea to draw a circle for fun or what exactly? That's where it comes from. Now let's continue. the other things I mentioned, yeah, the origin of grimoires. A lot of grimoires that people are familiar with, like the Greater Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, and all of its subdivisions, such as the grimoires, and it just goes on like that. In the Western world, these grimoires are canon, to say the least. These are the default magical workbooks. Okay.
Have a great day.
Yeah, sorry. Now someone is messaging me from Telegram. Yeah, ignore that. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah. No. These grimoires are canon. I mean, there is no Western country, honestly, to a lesser extent, any country in the world you can go to. Any person that has an interest in magic or in the occult overall is familiar with anything that has King Solomon's name attached to it. And yeah, of course, people that practice the occult in Western countries, or people that are simply practicing magic in the Western tradition, or people that live by Western standards, you name it, or all of the aforementioned, or a combination thereof, they're all familiar with this. This is like, duh, you know, everyone knows the Lesser and the Greater Key of Solomon, every practitioner more or less. And the spirits mentioned there, and the Goetia being the most popular one as far as I know, to the point where it's even mainstream. Now, just like I said here, these grimoires, they don't literally necessarily have to derive from King Solomon. Okay, the same way that, for example, a BMW, you can't attribute a BMW car or a vehicle of any kind to the inventor of the wheel. That's what I mean. The reason that it was done, to my knowledge and understanding, like I said, everything I say is based on my knowledge and experience, but that doesn't mean that it's literally set in stone, so be aware of that. Just like I said in the beginning of the article, what I'm simply saying is sharing my conclusions based on my own knowledge, expertise, and understanding, which obviously goes a long way, to say the least. Oh boy, one hell of an understatement. Anyways, yeah. Most of these grimoires, to my knowledge, they're attributed to Solomon, because Solomon was the King Solomon, the great King Solomon was the founder, he was the architect, he was essentially the very first guy, at the very least documentatedly, the guy that essentially, he was like the very first ceremonial magician. He was the very first guy that we know of, to put it that way, that did stuff like this, as in summoning spirits, using all the implements more or less, and going about all of that stuff, being able to command demons to do this, to do that, and having pretty much anything that you want, to put it that way. That's why, and these grimoires are named after him, simply to pay tribute to him, to pay homage to him, or homage. Yeah, the same way that, for example, what kind of example can I give? The same way that, for example, you have certain thingy streets in the world, and you name it, statues and buildings and whatnot that are named after certain individuals. It's a means of paying homage to them. It's like schools or airports that have names of historical figures. That doesn't mean that the historical figure is directly responsible for the airport the way it looks today, as in, oh look, airport, and all of its amenities and all of its components and all of that. No. It's just that the person had something to do with it in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily. It could just be a miscellaneous, in a matter of speaking, miscellaneous historical figure. But let's just say, provided that that is the case, so that provided that the person did indeed have something to do with aviation, then it's essentially, they named it after him because he was like the very first person that had anything to do with aviation. Like, for example, an airport that is named after the Wright brothers, you know, the guys that more or less, as far as I know, invented the airplane or contributed to it. You know, they invented like the very first like propeller plane, those small planes where you had like the wings, etc. The Wright brothers, W-R-I-G-H-T. Yeah, that doesn't mean that the Wright brothers, if an airport is named after them, that they're responsible for the airport and all of its amenities. It simply means that these guys were like the founders of basic aviation that was expanded into modern aviation. The same way that the inventor of the wheel, I don't know if it's known who the inventor of the wheel is. I mean, for all we know, if that isn't the case, If there is no if there is no documented inventor of the wheel, then people can also assume all kinds of things, like a caveman came up with the idea of just rolling a boulder that is circular in terms of shape, and he just rolls it and boom. By that logic, he's the inventor of the wheel, more or less. My point is that you can't like attribute a BMW or any kind of modern vehicle to the inventor of the wheel, not in a direct context. If, for example, someone's name is used for a specific model of vehicle or a brand of vehicle manufacturer, then it is simply a means of paying homage, a means of paying honor and paying tribute to someone like that, as in, this is the guy where it all got started, this is the guy. And that's why these grimoires are, to my knowledge, attributed to the great King Solomon. King Solomon was, again, if you look up King Solomon specifically within an occult context, then you see what time it is. You know, King Solomon was like the guy. He was like patient zero. You know, it essentially started with King Solomon to our knowledge. And that's why he's honored, well deservedly, obviously. Yeah, definitely all hail King Solomon. You know, he deserves to be paid homage to. Now let's see, what else did I mention? Yeah, and examples given, the Goetia, for example. I think someone at least and documented like what, at least 80% of all the Goetic spirits, I think, or 70%. In any case, a lot, like over 50 if I'm not mistaken. If I just look at my playlist on YouTube, Goetic spirits, I think it's like over 50. I can't remember exactly. In any case, it's been a lot. And I noticed that all of them are like, all the things I mentioned, that a good deal of them are pagan gods or infernal spirits like fallen angels, etc., like Belial, you name it, etc. Paimon, pagan god, Gramarye, it just goes on and on and on, you know. And the Goetia, other than the whole misinformational bit for those that are deemed worthy, as in, hey, listen, if this falls in the wrong hands, you know, things can go really bad or awry. So, you know, as an extra safeguard, let's just put a bunch of nonsense in there in terms of attributes. People that are serious will uncover the truth of things, and they'll see actually what these guys can actually do as opposed to what we jotted down, etc., etc. Setting that aside, it was like I said, like a baseball collector's edition. Throughout time, guys just collected spirits, and you know, as a means of like selling stuff, etc. You know, it's like the guy's trying to make a sale, as in, hey, I have a spirit for your collection, it's gonna be amazing. This guy, he can like make you talk to animals and everything. And it's like, really? Yeah, it's only like $200. Like, excellent, yeah, sure, no problem. As long as you can do what you say, then yeah, definitely good, baby. And it just goes on. There are miscellaneous reasons for why you see these spirit attributes in the Goetia and whatnot, and it just goes on. And essentially, they reached a point where someone simply made a collection, as in, okay, collection complete. You know, for all you know, there could be more spirits from the Goetia, not specifically 72, but, you know, at some point they said like, okay, it's enough. Now I'm simply going to fit it in the system. Okay, we need to do this and this and this and this and that. And needless to say, a good deal of these spirits, especially within the confines of the Goetia as a magical system, they were demonized. Like, all of them are demons, all of them have hideous shapes, all of them appear as either animals that can breathe fire at you or do some other horrific shit, no offense meant to them, pardon my French. And it just goes on. When in reality, that's not at all what they're like, you know. But, like I said, it's for the purposes of culture and whatnot, especially from a Christian or from a Jewish or Christian perspective, they were demonized. And that was taken, whether it was the person that, or the people that contributed to the Goetia in question, the magicians, hold on, the magicians in question, whether the magicians in question actually attributed, almost getting distracted. When the magicians in question that contributed to, whether they magicians or not, the people as a whole that contributed to the Goetia, whether they think it, whether they were aware of it or not, as in whether they did it deliberately or not, as in, hey, these are pagan gods and they're not infernal spirits, and it just goes on. I think they simply got it mixed up. You name it. So yeah, you can already tell that the Goetia is quite a mess, honestly. if you look at it from an administrative perspective, oh boy, is it a mess. But again, any serious practitioner will be able to, like me, will be able to iron things out. No offense meant to the GoH as a system, but yeah, you know, just a lot of stuff going on. And yeah, that's how it all got started. And in reality, like I've already described, and for a good deal of the spirits that I've covered from the Goetia, there's nothing wrong with them. You can summon all of them. Not once did I come across one of them that was like aggressive or dangerous or just outright evil, that is, oh, you know, this guy's bad news, etc. No, I never sense any kind of negativity or malevolence from them. But within the scope of the Goetia as a magical system, they're essentially forcing these spirits to appear malevolent, malignant, and sinister and whatnot, and to appear the way they do, you know. It's like taking a group of average people, normal people, and you're simply telling them to act like a bunch of bloodthirsty murderers, regardless of the purpose, and in some way, shape, or form, you're essentially forcing them to do so. Then yeah, you're going to get a bunch of normal people that simply enter a room and they all start swearing and saying that they're going to kill everything and everyone, and yelling and screaming and all of that, when in reality, let's just say it's an act, to put it that way. It's not what they're actually like. So yeah, that is pretty much, those are the roots of the Goetia, to my understanding and knowledge and experience. And as last but not least, as for the Greater Key of Solomon, the Order of the Pentacles, yeah, no, it's I can tell that the Order of the Pentacles is quite old. I mean, it has to be at least a couple of 100 years old at the very least. Okay, most likely it's older than that. It could be like 500 years old, I don't know, 1,000 years old, 900, maybe more, you name it, take your pick. But yeah, no, the Order of the Pentacles, they are quite old, and these pentacles are like, essentially they're like magnets. Most of you know what they are. Most of you watching this know what they are by definition. They're magnets, and they simply it's their job to essentially, through spiritual energy, to bring about an objective, those that were assigned to them. So wealth, to bring wealth, etc. That's what they're like. And they have entities, so spirits associated with them. Generally speaking, they're celestial spirits, generally speaking. Sometimes they can be infernal in nature or otherwise, but I only know of the former two. I've only experienced those two, quote unquote only. So yeah, I can say with a fair amount of confidence, I don't think that there is like a pagan god in the mix there, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, within the context of this conversation or this explanation, point in case is that they have entities attached to them or associated with them or to them, and you know, it serves as like one big magnet, and those pentacles serve as one big magnet, and they attract the things that are attributed to them, and the entities that are attached or linked to these pentacles definitely get the job done. They see to it primarily or otherwise see to it that the job gets done in relation to what the Pentacle specializes in. And like I said, there's not a lot to say. The Order of the Pentacles, the Greater Key of Solomon, the Order of the Pentacles, it does exactly as it said. I haven't come across a single pentacle where I could say that, hey, the explanation is a bit off or the description. No. It says it can cause earthquakes, it can literally cause earthquakes. It says it can cause wildfires, it can literally cause wildfires. It says it brings about lightning and thunder, it brings about literally lightning and thunder. It says it can bring wealth, it will bring wealth. Regardless of who you are, where you are, what you are, you name it. Yeah, it's quite powerful, like really like a T-Rex on steroids powerful. And beyond. It's just, these pentacles are quite potent, and I love them for that reason. Like truly, I haven't seen a single other grimoire where it is said that you can do stuff like this. Like really, the Order of the Pentacles is the only one where I know that it can do stuff like cause earthquakes and stuff like that, like really heavy duty stuff. But yeah, as I mentioned, I also noticed that a couple of those pentacles are missing. Like the last three, if I'm not mistaken, the moon has 6. Venus has 5 and Mercury has 5, whereas all the remaining 4 classical planets, obviously there are only 7. Like I mean, the 7 are classical are 7. The Sun, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn are they all have 7 pentacles, but the former 3 that I mentioned have quote unquote only 5, and with the moon having 6. Venus and Mercury, as far as I know, I don't know, maybe I miscounted, but in any case, as far as I know, to my recollection, I checked it out briefly before recording this video. There's 5, and the moon is 6. The moon has 6. So it could be that you've got like lost pentacles that were like literally either lost in translation or through generational overhaul, I like to call it. So passing the knowledge on from era to era. And most likely during the translation and editing process, or editing process for the latest edition that an editor had access to, an occult editor, like for example Benjamin Rowe or similar, the rest of the text got lost because it was torn off, damaged, you name it. But it's possible that there are that all of them are supposed to have 7, so that would mean that there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pentacles missing. Let me see, 5, 4, 5, yeah, 5 pentacles missing. 1 for the moon and 2 for both Venus as well as Mercury. Yeah, anyways. Okay, worst case scenario is that that's not the case. It's just a presumption that I'm making. It is very realistically possible. And let me see. Yeah, no, for the rest, that is pretty much it, essentially, for people that were wondering where it comes from. Before I go, I'm simply going to say that this subject doesn't interest me enough to the point where I'm willing to look into it spiritually or devote any kind of mental or spiritual energy to it, because I'm not that kind of guy. I focus more or less purely on the practical. My point is the wheel has already been invented, metaphorically speaking, and I was born in an era where the wheel is already invented and refined and whatnot. It is simply my job to, just like everyone else in the world out there, to use it for mass consumption and to refine it if it is fate that I have to refine it if it falls within my means, plain and simply put, my skill and everything, and if it's just overall fated, as is everything else by Almighty Father's will, as is everything, to refine it even further and to pave the way for the next generation, provided that the next generation will continue to use the wheel. Finding out who the inventor of the wheel was is an interesting story, but not interesting enough to the point where I would go out of my ways, like do personal research, as in like literally go to library, and to literally spend devote a considerable amount of time and effort to finding out who the inventor of the wheel was. In that same context, for me, it would be an interesting story, or it is an interesting story to either find out or to hear where these grimoires come from originally, what their backstory is and whatnot. But my main purpose is to make use of them, full use of them. The wheel has already been invented. Okay, these grimoires are already here. All the energies in it and energies associated with them are there for one purpose: to be utilized by a competent practitioner, to say the least, obviously. So, obviously me, to say the least, again. And what's important is that I fully utilize it and make use of it for my own purposes as well as overall, and refine it the way I have done, since I possess the means and the skill and the knowledge and the know-how and everything else needed more or less to do so, at the very least, to say the very least. So that is all. Let me know if you have any questions. Goodbye. Until next time.